I parked at a two-story house I knew on Cedar Street and sat in the car for a few seconds, gathering my courage. Sunday dinners at my parents' house had become something of a chore for me. I couldn't miss them, but they were no fun. My mom had called on Thursday to remind me that everyone was expected at 6, adding that Adele would be bringing good news. Adele always had good news, unlike me. The front door swung open before I could reach it. My mother stood in the doorway wearing her best dress, the dark blue one she had worn to every family celebration for the past 5 years. Her hair was done, her lips were painted, she was clearly getting ready for something important. Tenley, finally. She hugged me with a perfumed embrace that smelled of anticipation. Come on in, everyone's here. Dad and Adele were sitting at the dining room table. Dad was in his usual plaid shirt, scrolling through his phone, while my sister was talking animatedly, gesturing with her hands. When she saw me, she jumped up and rushed over. Sis! Adele had always been dramatic. How are you? How's your computer work? I shrugged and sat down on a free chair. The table was set according to all the rules. A white tablecloth, nice dishes that Mom only took out on special occasions. In the center was a chicken and potato casserole that smelled of dill and butter. Works fine, I replied, placing a napkin on my lap. What's the occasion? Mom and Dad exchanged meaningful glances. Adele was beaming with delight. Tell them, dear, Mom nudged me. I got a promotion, Adele blurted out, unable to hold back any longer. Can you imagine, Senior Corporate Loan Manager? I start on June 1st. My salary will go up by $2,500. Dad put down his phone and clapped his hands. Wow, our girl is growing up. I always knew you'd amount to something. We're so proud of you, added her mother. And there was something in her voice that I had never heard before when she spoke to me. Senior manager at 26. Remember how you used to worry about math in school? Adele laughed. Mom, that was 100 years ago. It's completely different now. I have such an interesting job at the bank, with new projects every day, and the team is just amazing. I served myself some casserole and listened to the familiar song. Adele talked about her successes. Her parents admired her and asked questions. When she was in college, they discussed her grades in the same way. When she got her first job, they talked about her achievements. When she moved out of her parents' house, they talked about what a wonderful apartment she had found and how wisely she was managing her money. What's going on with you, Tenley? Her father asked, when the praise for her sister finally paused. Still at the same office? Same one. What do you do there again? I've explained it 10 times, but you ask me every time as if my job is so insignificant that it's not worth remembering. Technical documentation. I write instructions for software. Oh, right. He nodded without much interest. How's it going? Any chance of a promotion? Not yet. That's a shame, my mother interjected. You're stuck in the same place. Adele's getting her 3rd promotion in 2 years. I have a stable job and a decent salary, I replied in an even tone. Normal, my mother repeated, as if the word meant something indecent. When are you going to buy an apartment? Or are you going to rent forever? We had arrived at our favorite topic. The apartment I was renting was in an old part of Austin. It was small and not very modern, but it suited me. I paid $800 a month, which was considered a pretty reasonable price for the city. I'm happy with it for now. But it's money down the drain, my dad chimed in. $800 a month, that's over $9,000 a year. And for what? Adele nodded in agreement with her parents. Dad's right. I'm saving up for a down payment. I've almost got enough. I plan to buy by the end of the year. Good for you, Dad said approvingly. That's the right approach. And you, Tenley? Aren't you even trying? I chewed on my chicken and thought about how to respond. That I'd been saving for 3 years, scrimping and saving on literally everything? That I already had enough money not only for the down payment, but for much more? That I was meeting with a real estate agent tomorrow to finalize the paperwork. I'm thinking about it, I said instead. Thinking isn't enough. Mom cut a piece of casserole and put it on her plate. You have to act. Adele is acting. She's studying, working, growing, and you're stuck. Mom, don't! Adele tried to intervene, but without much conviction. No, I'll say it. Mom was getting heated. She's 23 and she's still a child. She lives in a rented apartment, has a meaningless job, and no plans for the future. Sometimes I think we did something wrong when we were raising her." Dad put down his fork and looked at me seriously. "Tenley, we don't want to upset you. We're just worried. Time is passing, and you're just treading water." "I'm not treading water." "Then what are you doing?" Mom leaned forward. "Where are your accomplishments? Where are your successes? Adele tells us something good every month, but all we hear from you is the same thing. Your job, your apartment, and that's it." The room fell silent. Adele studied the contents of her plate. Dad drummed his fingers on the table, and Mom looked at me with an expression I had known since childhood, a mixture of disappointment and shame. "You know what?" she said finally. "Sometimes I'm ashamed that we have a daughter like you." The words hung in the air. Dad grimaced. Adele looked up at Mom in surprise. I carefully placed my fork next to my plate and stood up. "Thanks for dinner." I grabbed my bag and headed for the door. Behind me, I heard Mom say something to Dad, and he replied in a hushed voice. Adele called after me, but I didn't turn around. It was cool on the porch. It was a May evening in Austin, with the first crickets chirping and the smell of blossoming trees in the air. I got into my car and started the engine. Adele's face flashed in the rearview mirror in the living room window. Monday began as usual. The alarm went off at 7. I took a shower and grabbed coffee from the vending machine on the first floor of my office building. I ran into Marcus, a programmer from the neighboring department, in the elevator, and we chatted about our plans for the day as usual. Nothing special, just the routine that suited me fine. At my desk, I turned on my computer and opened the document I'd been working on for the past 2 weeks, a technical manual for a new version of our company's software. It was complicated, with lots of nuances, but those were the kinds of tasks I liked best. Organizing complex information so that any user could understand it. "Good morning, Tanley." Jason, my boss, popped his head into my cubicle. "How's the documentation for the new release coming along?" "Almost done. I should be finished by Wednesday." "Great. The developers say your instructions are the clearest they've ever seen. The clients are happy with almost no complaints." I nodded, continuing to type. The praise was nice, but I knew my worth. I had been with the company for 4 years, starting as an intern at $2,000 a month, then becoming a junior technical writer at $4,000, and now a senior technical writer with a salary of $8,000 a month. Not bad for a girl who, according to her parents, just taps away at the keyboard. I remember how it all started. I was 10, Adele was 13. She was learning French, playing the piano, and playing tennis. I read books and loved doing jigsaw puzzles. My parents enrolled me in music school, but I quit after 6 months. We tried dancing, but that only lasted a month. Sports didn't work out either. "You're not interested in anything," my mother said when I was 14. "Look at your sister. She has so many hobbies, so much energy." But I had my own energy. It was just not directed where my parents wanted it to be. I loved figuring out how things worked. I read the instructions for household appliances, studied diagrams, and tried to understand the logic of how the world worked. But they thought it was strange and useless. In high school, the gap became even more noticeable. Adele was the star of the school. Excellent grades, lots of friends, involved in all the activities. The teachers adored her. I was a quiet girl who sat in the back rows and did my homework without being reminded, but didn't particularly impress anyone. "Maybe you should try to be more sociable," my mom suggested. "Adele brings so many friends home and you're always alone." I didn't explain that I liked being alone, that I felt awkward around my peers, but comfortable at home with a book or on the computer. For my parents, it was a problem that needed to be solved. I chose my university myself, technical communication, a major that few people had heard of. My parents wanted me to go into management like Adele or marketing. "Something practical," they said. But I insisted, and it was the first time I had openly opposed their opinion. My studies went smoothly. I understood how to turn complex technical information into clear instructions, how to structure material, how to take user needs into account. My teachers praised my work, but at home no one asked about it. Instead, they asked about Adele. How was Adele doing at university? What were her plans? Who was she dating? Where was she going to work? They somehow forgot about me. or they remembered, but only in passing. "Tanley is also a good student," my mother would say to her friends, but without the enthusiasm she showed when talking about Adele. After university, I found a job at a small IT company fairly quickly. The salary was modest, $5,500 a month, but not bad for a start. I rented a one-room apartment for $800, bought a used car, and started my independent life. And then I started saving. Not because of ambition or a desire to prove something to anyone. I just realized that I wanted my own home. Not an apartment in a high-rise, but a house with a yard where I could plant a garden and not hear my neighbors above me. Real estate prices in Austin were rising every year, but I kept a close eye on the market and knew that in some developing areas, it was still possible to find something suitable. The plan was simple: save $4,000 every month. It sounded unrealistic with a salary of $5,500, but I was stubborn. I stopped eating out, bought groceries at cheap stores, and cooked at home almost all the time. I bought clothes at thrift stores and kept entertainment to a minimum. Movies once a month, meetings with colleagues at a cafe no more than once every 2 weeks. I only filled up my car when the tank was almost empty and tried to drive as little as possible. The first year was tough. $1,500 for food, gas, clothes, medicine, and everything else is very little. But I persevered because I had a goal. By the end of the year, I had $48,000 in my account. In my second year, my salary was raised to $6,500. I continued to save $4,000, which left me with $2,500 for living expenses. Things got easier. I could sometimes afford a nice dinner or new clothes that weren't from a thrift store. My parents thought I was living paycheck to paycheck because I never asked for money or bought expensive gifts. I just didn't tell them about my savings. When my mom complained about my paltry salary, I didn't argue. Let them think I was a failure. I didn't care. By the end of my second year, my salary had risen to $8,000. Now I was saving $5,000 a month and had $3,000 left for living expenses. That was a decent amount of money. I could afford good food, quality clothes, and a vacation once a year. And I could continue to save for a house. I was valued at work. I became the only technical writer in the company who could work with the most complex products. Developers came to me for help with documentation. Managers asked me to explain the features of the software to clients. My salary grew because I was a real specialist. But to my parents, it was still just tapping on keys. They didn't understand the difference between typing and creating technical documentation. They didn't know that I needed to understand programming, system architecture, and user needs. To them, any job on a computer was the same. "Tenley is sitting at the computer again," my mother would say to her friends. "I don't know what she's doing there, but she's not making much money." But I was making money, and I was saving it. By the beginning of this year, I had $155,000 in my account. That was enough for a down payment and all the associated costs for a house worth up to $800,000. I started seriously looking at real estate listings. Every weekend I went to look at houses, talked to realtors, and explored neighborhoods. I wanted to find something special, not just a box with a piece of land, but a place I could call my own. And 3 weeks ago, I found it. The house is in the Del Valle neighborhood, which is actively being developed and is considered one of the most promising in Austin. It's a 2-story, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house with a 2-car garage and a 1/4-acre lot. It was built 5 years ago, and the previous owners moved to another state and were selling it urgently. The price was $770,000, exactly what I had planned to spend. Last night, after dinner with my parents, I reread the purchase agreement. Tomorrow, I have a meeting with the real estate agent to sign the final documents. The day after tomorrow, I'll have the keys. And my family has no idea that their failure, who just types away at a keyboard, bought a house that's more expensive than theirs. Tuesday started early. I woke up at 6 in the morning, even though my alarm was set for 7. I had a restless night, thinking about the upcoming meeting with the real estate agent. The documents were neatly stacked on the table: bank statements, proof of income, the purchase agreement. Everything had been ready for a week, but I checked and double-checked. The coffee tasted especially bitter, and the toast stuck in my throat. My excitement grew with every passing minute. At 8:30, I was already at the real estate agent's office on South Lamar. Melissa Crowley, a woman in her mid-40s with a neat haircut and a business suit, greeted me with a smile. "Ready to become a homeowner?" she asked, sorting through the documents on her desk. "Ready," I replied, my voice sounding more confident than I felt. The next 2 hours were spent filling out paperwork, signatures, stamps, explanations of legal technicalities. Melissa patiently explained each point of the contract, even though I had already studied everything in advance. A bank transfer for $140,000, the initial deposit and associated costs. The numbers on the computer screen represented 3 years of my life, 3 years of saving and planning. "Congratulations," Melissa said, handing me a set of keys. "The house is officially yours." The keys were warm in my palm, 2 ordinary keys for the locks and 1 small key for the mailbox. Such simple things, but they meant more than all of Adele's congratulations on my promotions over the past few years. It was a 20-minute drive from the office to my house. I drove slowly, taking in the neighborhood that was now mine. Del Valle was quickly becoming one of the most promising areas in Austin. New houses were springing up like mushrooms after rain, and there were signs for shopping centers and restaurants on every corner. The city authorities were planning a large park here, and a new public transport line was due to open in 2 years. My house stood at the end of a quiet street that would cease to be quiet in a month or 2. It was a 2-story house with beige walls and a brown roof, a small porch and a garage on the side. The plot was larger than it appeared in the photographs. Enough space for the garden I planned to plant, while I could still enjoy the relative peace and quiet. I inserted the key into the front door lock and turned it. Click, and the door opened. My house, my walls, my floors, my windows. Inside, it smelled of paint and new wood. The previous owners had left the house in perfect condition, clean, freshly renovated, ready to move in. I walked through all the rooms, turning on the lights, opening the windows, checking the taps. Everything worked. Everything was exactly as I remembered from the viewings. In the kitchen, I stopped at the large window overlooking the yard. A high fence separated my property from the neighbors, but there were gaps between the boards in some places. Through one of them, I saw a woman in her 50s watering flowers with a hose. Noticing me, she waved. "Are you the new neighbor?" she called over the fence. I stepped into the yard. The woman was short, plump, with gray hair pulled back in a bun. She was wearing jeans and a floral garden shirt. "Yes, I'm Tanley. I just got the keys today." "Carol Dixon," she introduced herself. "I've lived here for 2 years, one of the first. Welcome to the future center of Austin. It's a nice house. The Martinez family kept it in good shape." The Martinez family? The previous owners. They moved to Houston for his job. It was sad to see them go, but they sold at just the right time. In a year or 2, prices will skyrocket. Carol was clearly aware of all the plans for the area's development and was happy to fill me in on the details. "See that vacant lot behind those houses?" She pointed. "There's going to be a big shopping center with a supermarket and a movie theater. And over there," she turned in the other direction, "they're planning to build a school and a daycare center. And a park, of course, which they promise will be one of the best in the city." "That sounds impressive," I said. "Of course. I bought my house for $450,000, and now real estate agents are already valuing it at $700,000. And that's just the beginning. Was your house expensive? If you don't mind me asking, of course." I thought for a second. I didn't want to lie, but I didn't want to give details to a stranger either. $770,000, I said. It seemed like a reasonable investment for such a promising area. "Smart girl." Carol was beaming with approval. "It's rare to meet young people with such an understanding of real estate. Most people only look at the current amenities, but you're thinking about the future. In a couple of years, your house will be worth at least $1 million, believe me." We chatted for another 10 minutes or so about the city's plans, the new restaurants that were about to open, and how the neighborhood was soon to become the place where all of Austin's wealthy people would want to live. "If you need anything, let me know," she said as she left. "My phone number is in the address book that the management company gives out to everyone, or just knock on my door. We all know each other around here." I spent the rest of the day at home, planning where to put the furniture and making shopping lists. A refrigerator, washing machine, bed, and sofa were the main things I needed to buy first. I would move the furniture from my rented apartment over the weekend. In the evening, I stood on the porch and looked at my plot of land. The sun was setting, painting the sky pink and orange. Construction machines were working somewhere, and children's voices could be heard from the neighboring house. These were the sounds of a developing neighborhood that in a couple of years would become one of the most prestigious in the city. For the first time in many years, I felt truly happy. Not content or satisfied, but happy. This house was the result of my own efforts, my planning and perseverance. No one helped me buy it, no one gave me advice or money. I did it all myself. The next day at work, I was in a great mood. Jason noticed that I looked especially cheerful and asked if something good had happened. I replied that I had just slept well without mentioning the house. I didn't want to share the news with anyone yet. On Thursday evening, I was at the hardware store choosing light bulbs for the house when the phone rang. It was Vivian, my mother. "Tenley, hi," she said, sounding strange. "Where are you?" "At the store. Why? Can you talk?" "Sure, of course." There was a short pause, then my mother spoke quickly, excitedly. "I just got a call from Jennifer Rowlings, remember? We worked with her at the insurance company? Well, she's a real estate agent now, and everyone at her agency is talking about Del Valle. Some young woman bought a house there for $770,000, and her name is the same as yours. Tanley." My heart skipped a beat. Carol hadn't been able to resist telling one of the local real estate agents about the new resident in the prestigious neighborhood and the price of the house. The information had quickly spread throughout the professional community. "It's not a very common name," my mother continued. "Jennifer immediately thought it might be you and decided to check. It's not you, is it?" I was standing in the electrical department between shelves of light bulbs, wondering what to say. I didn't want to lie, but it was awkward to explain over the phone. "Mom, it's a long story. Let's meet and talk about it." "So it's true? Did you buy a house for $770,000? My mother's voice rose. "Yes, it was me." There was such a long silence on the line that I wondered if the connection had been lost. "Mom, are you there?" I don't understand," she finally said. "Where did you get all that money?" After that conversation with my mom at the hardware store, I asked her not to call Dad and Adele until we could meet and talk properly. Mom agreed, but I could tell by her voice that it was difficult for her. We agreed to meet on Saturday afternoon, but those plans were ruined on Friday morning. I was eating breakfast at home, reading the news on my phone, when the phone rang. It was Dad. He never called at 8 in the morning on a workday unless something serious had happened. "Tenley," he said, sounding confused. "Can you explain what's going on?" Mom was up all night, muttering something about the house and money. "She says you bought a house for $700,000, is that true?" I closed my eyes. Mom couldn't take it anymore and told him. "It's true, Dad. But how? Where did you get that kind of money? You said you had a normal salary." "My salary is normal. I saved up." "Saved up?" He repeated the word as if it were a foreign language. "How many years?" 3 years. 3 years, Dad repeated. "And we didn't know anything." His voice sounded somewhere between hurt and amazement. I understood that feeling. My parents had considered me a failure their whole lives, and now it turned out that their failure had bought a house more expensive than they could afford. "Listen," Dad said after a pause. "Why don't you come over? We can talk properly. Mom is very worried." "Okay, I'll come on Sunday." "Can't you come today? Or tomorrow?" "Dad, I have work to do. Sunday is fine." He agreed, but reluctantly. After that call, the workday passed in a fog. I mechanically edited documents and replied to emails from colleagues, but my mind was elsewhere. Until now, buying a house had seemed like a personal achievement, my little victory. But now everything had become more complicated. In the evening, as I was unpacking boxes in my new home, the phone rang. It was Adele. "Hi, sis," she said cautiously, not sounding like herself. "How are you?" "Fine. How about you?" "Listen, Mom told me about your house. Is it true?" Yes, it's true. Wow. She paused. Can I see it? I mean, if you don't mind? This was unexpected. Adele was usually only mildly interested in my life. Sure, come over on the weekend. Do your parents know the address? Not yet. I see. Another pause. Listen, Tan, they're really worried, especially my mom. She keeps saying we underestimated you. Underestimated, I repeated. That's an interesting word. Well, you know how it looks. We thought that you weren't doing very well financially. And it turns out you bought a house that's more expensive than ours. My parents' house was indeed worth less. They bought it 15 years ago for $450,000. Now it's valued at about $600,000, but it's still cheaper than mine. I didn't want to upset anyone, I said honestly. I understand. It was just a shock to us, especially after that dinner on Sunday. That dinner. Mom's words about shame. Suddenly it became clear why my parents were so upset, not only because they had unexpectedly learned about my financial situation, but also because they had humiliated me the day before. I spent Saturday trying to get the house in order and prepare for the conversation with my family. I went to a furniture store to choose a sofa and a dining table. The salespeople were polite and attentive. Apparently, buying a house in Del Valle automatically classified me as a solvent customer. On Saturday evening, my mother sent me a message. Tenley, can I come over tomorrow? I'd like to see the house and talk calmly. I replied with the address and time. Sunday was sunny and warm. I got up early and tidied up the house. Although there wasn't much to clean, I didn't have many things yet, and everything was in its place. At 11 in the morning, I heard the sound of a car pulling up in the driveway. My mom hadn't come alone. My dad got out of the car with her, followed by Adele. I hadn't expected them all to come at once, but I met them at the front door. Hi, my mom said uncertainly. Can we come in? Of course. They entered the house and stopped in the hallway, looking around. Dad whistled as he looked at the high ceilings and the wide staircase to the second floor. Adele silently examined the wall finishes. It's beautiful, Mom said finally. Very beautiful. I showed them around the first floor. The living room, kitchen, dining room, study, and guest bathroom. They followed me, asking questions about the layout, the materials used, and the furniture. They were ordinary questions, but there was something new in them, respect. How many rooms are upstairs? Dad asked. 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Can we take a look? We went upstairs. The master bedroom had large windows and its own bathroom, 2 guest bedrooms, and another bathroom. Adele went into the master bedroom and stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the yard. The lot is large, she said. You could plant a garden. I'm planning to. How many cars does the garage fit? 2. Dad shook his head. It's a dream house, he said. To be honest, I couldn't even imagine you could afford something like this. We went down to the living room and sat down on the sofa I had bought the day before. Mom sat on the edge, nervously fiddling with the strap of her bag. Dad looked up at the ceiling beams. Adele was silent. Tenley, Mom began. I need to tell you something. What happened last Sunday? The things I said, they were wrong. Mom, don't. No, I have to. I said something terrible. I said I was ashamed to have a daughter like you. That's not true. I'm ashamed of myself. Dad nodded. We were wrong about you. We thought you couldn't handle finances, planning, life in general. But all this time, you were saving up for a house. Not just saving, Adele added. You studied the real estate market, chose a neighborhood, filed paperwork. That's a lot of work. I listened to their words and didn't know how to feel. On the one hand, it was nice to hear their acknowledgement. On the other hand, it all sounded too late. Can you forgive us? My mother asked. I understand that words can't fix what we've done all these years, but we want to change everything. Change what exactly? Our attitude, my dad replied. We got used to thinking of you as the youngest, the inexperienced one, but it turns out you're the most practical of us all. Adele suddenly stood up and walked over to the window. You know what I thought when I saw this house? She said without turning around. That I envy you. I've spent my whole life doing what my parents expected of me. I studied to be a manager because it's prestigious. I work at a bank because it's stable. And you did what you wanted to do and achieved more than I did. Adele, Mom began. No, Mom, it's true. I make more than Tanley, but I live in a rented apartment and dream of a house I can't afford, and she lives in a house that will be worth $1 million in a year. Silence hung in the room. A bird flew past the window and a lawnmower started up somewhere. We've done a lot of things wrong, Dad finally said. But we want to fix it, if you'll let us. Dad's words hung in the air, and I felt something tighten inside me. They wanted to fix our relationship, but I could see that even now, in my own home, they couldn't break out of their old patterns. Adele was still comparing herself to me, only now in the opposite direction. My parents still saw me through the prism of success and achievement, only now there were more achievements. Let's go to the kitchen, I suggested. I'll make coffee. We moved into the kitchen with its large windows and modern appliances. I turned on the coffee machine I had bought last week and took the cups out of the cupboard. My parents sat down at the island, continuing to look around. What's that appliance? My dad asked, nodding at the dishwasher. It looks expensive. Bosh, I replied curtly. And the stove? Gas, professional series? Mom ran her hand over the countertop. Marble, quartz. The questions came one after another. How much did the furniture cost? Where did I buy the appliances? What brand of plumbing fixtures were in the bathrooms? I answered in monosyllables, feeling my irritation growing. They were trying to put a price on my home, as if that was the only way to understand its value. Listen, I said, putting the coffee cups on the table. Did you come here to apologize or to draw up an estimate? My mother looked down guiltily. I'm sorry, we didn't mean to. It's just so unexpected for us. We're proud of you, my dad added. We really are. A house like this in a neighborhood like this is a serious achievement. And there it was again, pride based on material success. I wonder if they would be proud of me if I bought a modest apartment in a normal neighborhood. Adele, who had been silent until then, suddenly spoke up. 10. Can you give me your real estate agent's contact information? I want to look at something in this neighborhood too. There's nothing for sale here in your price range, I replied honestly. How do you know my budget? Adele, houses here cost $700,000 and up. You don't have that kind of savings. She blushed. Maybe I'll take out a bigger mortgage. That's not reasonable. Your salary won't cover those payments. Tenley, my mother interjected, don't be so categorical. Adele is a smart girl. She'll figure it out. There it was. Even now, when they had come to apologize, my mother automatically defended Adele. Some things never change. I'm not being categorical, I'm being realistic, I replied. There's a difference. Dad tried to diffuse the situation. Girls don't fight. We came to talk things over. We're not fighting, Adele said indignantly. It's just that Tanley thinks she knows everything about real estate now. I put my cup down on the table harder than I intended. Adele, I studied the real estate market for 3 years before buying a house. You just found out about my purchase, and 5 minutes later you wanted to buy something similar. These are different approaches. You've become so arrogant, she said. And you're jealous. Girls, Mom raised her voice. Stop it right now! We came here to make peace and you're arguing again. I looked at them, at my mom, who was again trying to reconcile everyone without understanding the essence of the conflict, at my dad, who was awkwardly silent, at Adele, who was sulking like a hurt child. And I realized that nothing had changed. The only thing that had changed was their attitude toward my financial capabilities. Mom, I said calmly, you said you wanted to change your attitude toward our family. But what exactly do you plan to change? Well, we'll support you more, take an interest in your work, your plans. What if you don't like my plans? What do you mean? Let's say I decide to change jobs for one that pays less but is more interesting. Or I spend money on travel instead of investing. Or I decide to sell the house and move to another city. Mom thought about it. But why would you want to change a good job? That's not answering my question. Tenley, we just want you to be happy, Dad said. No, you want me to be successful. Those are different things. Adele snorted. What's the difference? You're successful and happy now. What if I were happy but not successful? Would you treat me the same? The kitchen fell silent. A car drove by outside and a dog barked somewhere. My parents looked at each other, clearly unsure of how to respond. That's a difficult question, my mother finally said. Not for me, I replied. I want the people I consider family to accept me regardless of the size of my bank account or the prestige of my job. But we do accept you, Adele protested. Really? Then why, in all these years, have you never once asked me if I like my job? Why has no one ever been interested in what I dream about or what worries me? Why did all conversations boil down to comparisons with Adele and criticism of my achievements? Dad scratched the back of his head. Maybe we really were wrong, but we want to fix it. Okay, then let's agree on some rules. What rules? Mom asked in surprise. I stood up and leaned against the tabletop. I needed to clearly articulate what had been brewing in my head for a long time. The first rule is no comparisons between me and Adele. We are different people with different goals and different ways of achieving them. I agree, Adele nodded. The second rule is that my finances are my responsibility. No advice on how to spend or save my money unless I ask for it. My mother frowned. But we're your parents, we worry. Mom, I'm 23 years old. I bought a house without your help. I think I can handle my money. Okay, my father agreed. What else? Rule number 3, no one has the right to tell me what to do with my life, where to work, how to spend my time, who to date. I'm willing to listen to your opinion if I ask for it, but I make the final decisions myself. What if you make a mistake? Mom asked. Then it will be my mistake, and I'll deal with the consequences myself. Adele stirred her spoon in her cup. What if we break these rules? Then I'll limit our communication. Not completely, but until you understand that I'm serious. Are you trying to blackmail us? My mother said indignantly. I want to protect myself from toxic communication. There's a difference. Dad sighed. It sounds harsh, but I guess it's fair. We really did behave badly. Not badly, I corrected. You behaved the way you knew how. But now we have a chance to learn how to communicate differently. We sat in the kitchen for another hour discussing the details. How often to meet, what to talk about, what to avoid. The conversation was difficult but necessary. I knew that old habits wouldn't disappear overnight, but at least now we had clear boundaries. When my parents and Adele were ready to leave, my mom hugged me goodbye. Thank you for giving us a chance, she said. We'll try not to disappoint you. I don't expect perfect behavior, I replied. I just want honesty and respect. Dad shook my hand like an adult. We're proud of you, he said, not just because of the house, because of who you've become. Adele hugged me last. I'm sorry I said you were arrogant, she whispered. I was just confused. It's okay, we all need time to adjust. I walked them to the car and waved goodbye. They drove away, and I stood on the porch of my house. The sun was setting, painting the sky in familiar shades of pink and orange. My head was empty and calm. My relationship with my family wasn't perfect after one conversation, but now we had rules that everyone understood, and that was a start.